Bloomberg drops out of the race, and Democrat primary voters call it all rigged. United Airlines grounds flights due to concern about the coronavirus, and a noose is found on the locker of a Molson Coors employee. It's going to be all of this and more. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. All right, folks, let's start this again and try it again with a microphone this time. I got all the way through the intro card and was just starting in the opening monologue, and I realized that the microphone was not on, so production top quality over here on Contemporary. But we do have a lot to talk about with the video game stream. I was debating going 4 days a week and just taking the day after I play the video games until midnight off, but there was just too much stupid crap that happened yesterday. I know Seawall pointed it out the other day that he didn't know if I had lost humanity when I was laughing about. I don't even remember what I was laughing at about this the other day. When well, that's what happens when you get 4 hours of sleep. What was I laughing about? Oh, that's right, the typo that the Donald put out that got everybody in the mainstream media talking about it again for another 6 hours. And we were talking about top trending, and we saw Chalker top trending. It was early in the morning. I was tired. It was probably not as funny as I made it out to be, but yeah, that was a big loss in the faith of humanity. But we do have a lot to talk about here today as well. So, first thing is first, amid concerns given the Super Tuesday performance and the very, very weak showing that he had, Mike Bloomberg is out of the 2020 Democrat presidential race. Let's see what Fox News has to say about this. Mike Bloomberg suspends presidential campaign after Super Tuesday flop. This is from Paul Steinhauser and Kelly Farris over at Fox News. Former New York City Mayor Mike Bloomberg suspended his presidential campaign Wednesday after spending record amounts from his own fortune on an ad blitz strategy that failed to yield any wins Super Tuesday beyond a single victory in the American Samoa caucuses. He immediately announced he would be endorsing Joe Biden, following in the footsteps of other moderate leaning Democratic presidential candidates who have consolidated support behind the former vice president and in his primary brawl against Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. So, I mean, we knew this was coming. Bloomberg is not popular, and I mean, he wasn't making any traction no matter what. You can say what you want about Bloomberg and everything that he had going on there, but he was not making any form of traction in this race at all. So, I mean, it's a good thing he's out, but I think it's a little weird, especially once again, that we're going along and these people are just dropping like flies at this point. Now, to Bloomberg's credit, a lot of people would have said Bloomberg get out right away, even after he put all the ad blitzes in, but Mike did wait until he was actually on a ballot for a few things. Remember, Mike Bloomberg got into the race so late that he missed the first three primary states, so he really had nothing to go on. Polling was showing that he was doing actually fairly well. A lot of the polling was showing that he had maybe 15, 20% approval, even when the field was still packed. He was still doing fairly well. I was looking at things like Real Clear Politics all the time. He was consistently 15 to 20% going along, and he was consistently in third place. So I do think that he thought he was going to do better, and I actually thought he was going to do quite a bit better than what he actually did. But of course, once you get the pen to the paper in states that are actually voting, the polls go out the window and the real hard data is there, and Bloomberg didn't really have a path. Now, of course, he dropped out immediately and he went in and endorsed Joe Biden, which is part of the reason I do think that there is maybe something we need to look into here as well. I don't think this is pure and grassroots, the fact that he dropped out the way that he did. And I qualify this by saying, yes, he got immediately behind the establishment candidate that's facing off against Sanders, who is not even supposed to be in the race in the first place. Somebody on Twitter pointed out the other day that the DNC rules do say that in order to run for presidency on the DNC side, you do need to be a bona fide Democrat, which Sanders is not. He has never changed his party affiliation. So, with that in mind, The establishment is probably stepping in. Let me get my monitor out of the way here. The establishment is possibly stepping in and saying something, but what do you say to somebody who has $50 billion worth of assets and net wealth sitting out there that he can use to try and get him to change his mind about running for the highest office in the land and being a spoiler candidate as he goes along? Well, I mean, Hillary is the other big donor into the DNC. They do say that she owns the DNC, and a lot of people that don't do what Hillary wants to do wind up dead. And I'm sure Bloomberg knows that. I can't say for sure that somebody threatened that Bloomberg would suddenly jump out of the top window of his penthouse in New York City, but I'm saying it's a possibility. Especially given the fact that he jumped out and he threw his votes right behind Sanders. All of his delegates are also going to go to Bernie Sanders at this point. So Bernie Sanders is going to take a commanding lead once they calculate all the delegates coming in. So yeah, that's going to be interesting to watch. And I do think that there are some invisible hands that aren't necessarily so invisible that are going along with this as well. Of course, I can't vet any of this, and I can't verify any of this. This is just the gut feeling that I have on this. But amid other things that we had going on yesterday, the Hill reports, let's see what they have there, that there may be some voter suppression going on and definitely rigging of the primaries here. Let's see what the Hill has to say. Anaga Shrikant, I apologize if I butchered your name on this, over on the Hill, says long voter lines in Texas renew accusations of voter suppression. So this is something I noticed right away. Pretty much as soon as I turned the camera off, I went over onto Twitter yesterday and saw that this story was out there. And it seems that all of the Bernie fans were running out there and saying that the entire thing was rigged because Joe Biden did so well in Texas after Bernie Sanders led the state for as long as he did. And of course, because it's an election time and there are states that are voting that are not predominantly white, we also have the renewed call of voter suppression. So, what happened here, of course, and we'll touch on the Bernie fans here because they were a lot of the groups of people that were promulgating this myth, but let's look at what the Hill has to say here. Story at a glance. Voters in Texas waited in line hours on Super Tuesday as the state brought in extra voting machines, which that right there should tell you that this may be hoax already, but we won't go into that right away. Many of these long lines were in Black or Latinx, Latino majority districts, where hundreds of polling stations have been closed since 2012. It's Latino, it's not Latinx, fight me. Some accuse the state of voter suppression targeted towards minority communities. Let's go into some of the depth here. The last voter at Texas Southern University, a historically black public college in Houston, left the booth after 2 a.m. March 4th, 7 hours after he got in line on Super Tuesday. Many other black and Latino Texans shared the same experience, and by the morning after the state's primary elections, hashtag voter suppression was trending on Twitter, with almost 20,000 tweets by 10 a.m. Dozens of extra voting machines were sent to TSU and some other locations, as lines in some precincts were estimated to be several hours long, while some, including Rogers, waited, others did not. So, when you look through the trending yesterday, a lot of the people that were pushing this narrative were pushing the fact that the primaries were rigged against Bernie Sanders. It was a lot of white, college-aged Berniecrats that were out there screaming that it was rigged and this was going against Bernie. Which the other side of that, of course, is the fact that it was trending with rigged primary. I need to explain something to you here. This is based purely on statistics. I cannot speak for any of the individuals that were waiting in the line that would have voted for Bernie Sanders, because everybody's an individual. Everybody gets to pick who they want to pick, and there's no demographic against personal or for personal opinion. With that being said, we can look at statistics demographically. If anything at all if this was an actual problem, if this was actually specific rigging in a way that they want. And keep in mind, this is a Democrat primary. This is not a general election. We'll talk about that in just a moment here. So if this was supposed to be rigged against anybody, given the statistics, given the way that North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Arkansas, and a lot of other predominantly black southern states voted, this was rigged against Biden, if it was rigged at all. So we need to keep that in mind. This was not an attempt to take Bernie down, as much as the Bernie bros would love for you to think that. Given the statistics, this would have been a Biden rigging against the former vice president. So keep that in mind as well. And that is interesting to note as well as we look here, because the lines were so long, people were waiting so long to vote. These traditionally black communities were going to be the last ones to report because there were still people waiting in line when the polls closed. And I don't know Texas law. I know in Wisconsin, if people would have been still waiting in line when the polls closed, they would have been allowed in. Texas may be different. Texas can run their election however they see the most fit in Texas. Of course, if they are turning people away who are already in line at the time, I would definitely call that a form of voter suppression, but it is on Texas to regulate their elections the way that they see fit. But keep in mind as well that this is a primary that was put on by the Democrat Party. There was no GOP primary in Texas as far as I know. So everybody who was going up to vote was voting for the Democrats, especially in a region like that. So if everything was being put on by the Democrats, then they're only suppressing their own vote. And I don't see any reason why the Democrat Party would suppress the black vote at this point. But we look at Texas again. Like I said, these districts would have been the last ones to report. So we saw Bernie Sanders leading early, going on through Texas. It was flip-flopping throughout the majority of the night, but for the most part, on the flip side was Bernie, and on the flop side, on the minority, was Biden. We did see Biden start to take the lead towards the end, and of course, Biden won Texas as he went along. So tell me who the primary was rigged for. That's all that I have to say on that. But speaking of the primary being rigged, we also have to talk about Donald Trump goading Sanders fans here. So let's get rid of the hill here, and let's look at this. This is just from the Google front page. We've got some Twitter tweets from the Donald here, just right on the front page, of course, all from a day ago. Let's see what Donald has to say here. So selfish for Elizabeth Warren to stay in the race. She has zero chance of even coming close to winning, but hurts Bernie badly. So much for their wonderful liberal friendship. Will he ever speak to her again? She cost him Massachusetts and came in third. He shouldn't. There must have been a thread on that. I'm not going to go dig out the thread here, but let's look at what else we have here. The Democrat establishment came together and crushed Bernie Sanders again. Even the fact that Elizabeth Warren stayed in the race was devastating to Bernie and allowed Sleepy Joe to unthinkably win Massachusetts. It was a perfect storm, with many good states remaining for Joe. And the last one that they have right on the front page came from 22 hours ago. Wow, if Elizabeth Warren wasn't in the race, Bernie Sanders would have easily won Massachusetts, Minnesota, and Texas. Not to mention various other states. Our modern-day Pocahontas won't go down in history as a winner, but she may very well go down as the all-time great spoiler. So, not necessarily sure the strategy, except to sow more division and more of a civil war within the Democrat Party. And we're already seeing the Warrenites and the Bernieites who would refuse to vote for each other because, I guess, to be completely fair, Warren did completely plagiarize Bernie Sanders' playbook as she went along here. But, I mean, there is a deep division in the Democrat Party. The Union Democrats and the Progressive Socialists do not fit compatibly with each other. You see it as you go along. You see it when you talk to people. And, I mean, even AOC has brought it up. She has no idea why she's in the same party as Joe Biden, and she has no idea how any of it works. So, I don't... the guy is just a master of the media manipulation. And, of course, everybody on the Democrat side is watching the Donald's Twitter feed like a hawk. because they're looking for something to make the next trending hashtag to try and get famous for it and to try and screech about the fact that the orange man bad. And now he's feeding them something that he's feeding it right to their veins. I mean, it is like a main line to these people what Donald Trump is doing, and they are just taking it. As somebody on my Twitter feed said on a completely unrelated note, they are deep throating that bait as hard as they can. And it's hilarious to watch. And it's going to make it for a very, very interesting convention. And I do still believe we're going to contested convention. I think all of these people dropping out and coalescing behind Biden is an indication that they're trying to avoid a contested convention. But I don't think we are going to go into Milwaukee with all of the votes necessary to have a clear and direct nominee for the Democrat Party. I don't think the delegates are going to be there. So this is going to be interesting to watch. As I've said on Ed's World and I've said on this show, I believe, I am planning on going to the DNC. My channel's still small enough that I don't think I'll be recognized and beaten to death. So I'm going to go there. I'm going to see what goes on. I'm actually going to try and do some man on the street. I think Stephen Ignoramus is going to come with me. We haven't confirmed any of that, but we've talked about it off mic before. So I do think that he's going to come up and hang out. Probably crash on my couch here. We'll head over to Milwaukee and see if we can get through the weekend without dying, whether it be from a direct assault from some Democrat out there that recognizes our channels, or when we die in the flames after Kyle Jurek burns the city down. Whichever happens. But given the fact now that Biden is surging, and I can put the tinfoil on that if I want to, but let's see what the Hill has to say about this. As Biden surges, GOP Ukraine probe moves to the forefront. This is by Jordan Carney over at The Hill. GOP probe into Hunter Biden and the Ukrainian gas company Burisma is picking up speed on Capitol Hill as former Vice President Joe Biden gains new momentum in the 2020 Democratic primary. Republicans argue the investigation, spearheaded by Senators Ron Johnson, that is my senator, by the way, and Chuck Grassley of Iowa, isn't political and is broader than just Ukraine. But the effort threatens to put the former vice president back in the hot seat at a time when his campaign is on the rebound. Even as votes were still being tallied from the Super Tuesday races, where Biden staged what amounted to a come-from-behind victory, Johnson, who chairs the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, announced he would vote next week on a subpoena of a former executive firm with ties to Burisma. We're proceeding down this path, Johnson said Wednesday. If there's wrongdoing, the American people need to know it. If there is no wrongdoing or nothing significant, the American people will need to understand that as well. So I do believe that there is a part, and I've seen this tinfoil theory out there before, and I actually believe it as well. I do believe that the DNC is trying to make sure that Biden stays the front runner, because he was the front runner throughout the majority of the Ukraine scandal. He fell off when Sanders took a major resurgence in a packed field, and we had some other people that were juggling with the top. He fell off for a bit, but I do believe that the DNC is trying to keep him as the front runner right now, because then they have legitimacy for the impeachment that they just botched. If they can go and run ads saying that Donald Trump was out investigating a political rival when Biden was nowhere to be seen as a political rival at all, then all they're going to do is look petty, and it's going to cost them House seats. It absolutely will. It'll cost them more Senate seats, too. If they look that petty, that they were willing to go after somebody who was just investigating, who was in essence a private citizen. He was a candidate, but he had no traction. It's going to cost them everything. It will cost them everything as far as they go along politically. They will lose the House. And then Kevin McCarthy will run up and expunge the impeachment record. And Nancy Pelosi's claim that he's impeached forever will be no more. I truly believe that this is what they're doing. Call me Alex Jones, call me tinfoil. I truly believe that's what they're doing. So, but furthermore, yes, now that Biden is in the lead, I do believe that we need to understand and know this. And this is going to be something that's going to go in as well. It's going to be campaign ads. And of course, as far as I know, the president has nothing to do with this. I believe that Johnson is doing this independently and on his own volition. So We'll see what happens out of this. I'm actually quite eager to see. I mean, Biden is on tape saying that he was going to rescind the aid. He is on tape absolutely promising that. And there's no denial of that. So they'll have to investigate whether or not that actually happened and was actually true, which I think would be a pretty open and shut case. But yeah, the gaff master himself said that he did it. He's got a confession on tape. So, and that would be a huge shake, especially if he went up and got the nomination, which will afford him some protections, I believe, legally. But it would be interesting to see if the DNC actually made him step aside. I saw an article going around Twitter, and actually I should have grabbed it and kept it for this, but I did see an article from Vox from 4 years ago, back when Hillary was running, where somebody actually did the homework and figured out what would happen if a candidate were to drop out, like, say, on the Monday before Election Day, if the candidate were to do that, or any time after the candidate got the nod and got the nomination from either party. And the author actually went through and looked at what would happen in both parties, because both parties have similar rules, but mostly with different numbers. So the homework was done, and there's actually a process in place if the nominee should decide to drop out after getting the nomination. So let's look at that. In other news, Chuck Schumer got himself into a little bit of hot water yesterday with some statements that he made towards two of the newest justices on the Supreme Court. And of course, everybody jumped to his defense to say that, no, he didn't actually say this, and there's nothing going on here, and everything that Trump did is worse and worse and worse. But let's see what NBC News has to say. So, according to NBC News, in a rare rebuke, Chief Justice Roberts slams Schumer for threatening comments. Of course, the quotation is, "You have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price," the senator for New York said of Trump appointees on the bench. This is from Pete Williams over at NBC News. In Washington, Chief Justice Roberts publicly chastised Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer on Wednesday over comments Schumer made outside the Supreme Court as the justices were hearing a case on abortion rights. Schumer, Democrat in New York, suggested that President Donald Trump's court appointees Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh won't know what hit them if they vote to uphold abortion restrictions. He spoke during a rally on a sidewalk in front of the court building. "I want to tell you, Gorsuch, I want to tell you, Kavanaugh, you have released the whirlwind and you will pay the price," Schumer said. In a highly unusual written statement issued late Wednesday, Roberts said statements of this sort from the highest levels of government are not only inappropriate, but they are dangerous. "All members of the court will continue to do their job without fear or favor from whatever quarter," Roberts said. So this is pretty intense, I'm not going to lie. This is something that's bothered me from the moment. Brady Leonard over on Twitter brought this up to my attention. He put out a general tweet saying that Schumer came out and started making threats, and I went and vetted the story, and I mean, Schumer's not denying this is what he said. He's denying what it meant, and all of his followers are denying what it meant, but he is not denying that this is what he said. So, yeah, this is a direct threat from somebody on the high end, and I know they were already talking about impeaching Kavanaugh as soon as he was sworn in. They thus far haven't done that, possibly because they know that they can't get the conviction out of it. They can't put him through another criminal trial for something that they have no evidence of, and they can't get the votes to get him out. Because once again, it does take a 2/3 majority in the Senate to get him out. But, I mean, I don't know what the price is, and I would love to know what the price is. And of course, Schumer can't be reached for comment at this time, and there were some statements that came out from his office, but this kind of off-the-cuff thinking of all of this, and it's going to get people in trouble. And yeah, I would love to see what it was that he actually meant by the price. Now, a lot of people are comparing this to last week. Was it last week or the week before? The news cycle moves so fast. I think it was the week before when Trump said that Justices Sotomayor and Ginsburg should recuse themselves from anything that goes along with the president. Now, he never said, "You must step down, you must recuse yourselves, or you'll pay the price." He simply suggested the fact that they should because of statements that they've made against him. It's a fair assessment. I don't think that they should recuse themselves. I do believe that they should be involved. They were chosen for their opinions and the respect of their opinions. I don't respect their opinions, but the president that appointed them did, and they are appointed for life, so they should not step down. I believe Trump was wrong about that, but on the other side of that, yes, he does have the right to make the statement, and he didn't threaten any repercussions. Simply pointed out the fact that it would be hard for them to be impartial. And of course, everyone jumped down his throat because he was making threats to women rather. This is not comparable. This is absolutely not comparable. And I will rebuke Trump for the statements that he made because they were wrong. But this is not a comparable thing at all. This is apples and oranges, and Schumer did definitely make a direct threat on this. So we will look on and we will see what the consequences actually are. I'm interested to see that, but this is just another reason where we have to look up and say the Senate can't be flipped at this point. There is too much at stake, and these people are just being open about what they want to do to the American people. So the Senate should hold its current makeup. I actually like the fact that the Senate does not have a supermajority because they can't get anything done. And anytime that the government's hands are tied, I'm a happy guy. Because then they're not fucking in my life. But that is that here. On other news, on coronavirus, United Airlines is slashing flights and freezing hirings with the outbreak. Now, let's see what CNBC has to say on that. This is Leslie Josephs. United Airlines said Wednesday that it will reduce the number of April flights and suspend hirings and salary increases amid the global coronavirus outbreak that has hurt travel demand. United will cut its international flights scheduled for next month by 20% and those in the US and Canada by 10%. Some wide-body planes will be parked, and the company said on Wednesday. New hiring will be suspended through at least June 30th, except for roles that are critical to our operation, the airline said. So if a pilot quits, they're going to replace him. But they're not looking for stewardesses right now. Or flight attendants. I guess stewardesses is not politically correct anyway, and it's media. I have to be politically correct. CNBC previously reported that the airline postponed start dates for new pilots, offered some pilots a month off at reduced pay, and warned employees about further flight cuts beyond the reductions in Asia flights it announced last week. So this actually hits a bit close to home to me because I am sitting in a position right now where my job is actually going to make me take vacation. I don't want to take vacation. I just want to go in, do my job, get done, and come home and work on this. But if I want to take a vacation, I do actually kind of need the rest, and I'll admit that. If I don't go somewhere, all I'm going to do is sit and work on Freedom Scoop stuff. That's all I'm going to do for a week if I take vacation. And my first thought, of course, was when I first realized that I was going to be able to afford a vacation and do this, my first thought was, I'm always calm by water, let's go on a cruise. Well, then coronavirus hit. And people stayed for 5 weeks on a Princess Star Cruise Lines outside of Japan, and that idea went right out the window. No desire to get on a boat right now, and I have even less desire right now to get on a plane. I know one of my other ideas was to go and fly down to Utah and go hike the Red Rocks over in Zion Canyon. As everybody knows, I'm a big Fallout fan, so after playing the Honest Hearts DLC, I kind of want to see the canyon and the national park for myself, but not real thrilled to get on a giant incubator for virals and viral diseases right now. No real desire to do that. So, I'm sticking to somewhere I can drive at this point. I think maybe I'll go down to Tennessee and help them clean up, do some good work, do the Lord's work. I know I've got family down there. We talked about that yesterday. Or my other thought is get in the truck and drive down to D.C. and go hang out with Stephen Ignoramus for a week. Eat the food, go see the sights, go see the layer of scum and villainy that is Washington, D.C. Get back in the truck and drive home, which I think I'm going to do that. But yeah, I think a lot of people are having the same idea right now because, yes, there are points where you need to fly because to go from Wisconsin to Zion National Park, Utah is a 23-hour drive. You lose 2 days of vacation just by doing that. So if you've got something planned, you're going to need to fly. And it's the same thing with commerce. You need to fly for commerce. It's an unfortunate side effect, but we've got next day air. People need to do business meetings and go from New York to California or various other places across the country. You can't just ground all flights, but taking an elective flight just seems like a bad idea right now. Taking a flight that is not going to make you money, is only going to cost you money, just seems like a bad idea. And I think a lot of people share that sentiment, and I think that's a part of the reason that United is slashing these flights, because they can't sell them right now. They can't staff them and they can't sell them. And this would be a terrible time to be a flight attendant too. In other news, and this is coming from the R-Rated Conservative over on freedomscoop.com, who in a monologue decided that he needed to remind us that there was a woman out there who is claiming that if she gets the coronavirus, she is going to go to as many MAGA rallies as she can. Now, I know there have been jokes about, going up to various campaign offices with the coronavirus, but this would be mass or biological warfare on a massive scale. And that is given the fact that there are a lot of people that go to Trump rallies. There are a lot of people that go to Trump rallies. I mean, Biden can't fill a library and Trump fills every stadium. Biden can't fill a library in a town that's friendly to Democrats, and Trump goes and fills stadiums in left-leaning cities every time he goes. I don't know how he does it at this point. I don't know how he stands up and talks for 2 hours. I don't know if he's just snorting no-dos at this point, but there are a lot of people there is the point of there. And, I mean, on a disease with 2% fatality rate at this point, you could put 20,000 people in a stadium and you start flashing that disease around. 20,000 at 2% is 400 people dead. That's pretty sick. And once again, I mean, I've seen jokes about, okay, we'll go to Bloomberg's office in X city with the coronavirus and get him sick. That'll get 4 people sick. It's still a bad idea, and I still rebuke it. I still disavow the idea, but that's 4 people versus 20,000 people. So, yeah, the Secret Service definitely needs to be looking, especially given the fact that Trump is a 70-some-year-old man, and he's going to be at all of these. If this person is actually doing this and making good with this, there is a good chance that the Donald gets the coronavirus, and as lively as he is, he's old. That would be a direct threat to a sitting president. A direct, well, I would call it an indirect assassination attempt, but either way, it would be something that's worth looking into. So I do hope that somebody looks into this as well. That's dangerous thinking right there. It's dangerous thinking to go to the campaign office, but that is small scale and still stupid. All right, what else do we have here? Here's one from my neck of the woods here. So, according to CNN, and I don't buy any of this at all, because if this was true, this would have been the first thing that they would have been putting all over the news before this fell out of the news story. But let's see what CNN has to say. Mallory Simon over at CNN, noose once placed on locker of shooting at Molson Coors Company says. A noose was once placed on the locker of the man who shot and killed 5 coworkers at the Molson Coors complex in Milwaukee before taking his own life, the company said. The noose was found on Anthony Farrell's locker in 2015. Molson Coors spokesman Adam Collins said, the company has not been able to identify who placed it there. It was a disgusting act 5 years ago and remains disgusting today. Okay. So I didn't read this article before I actually put it in the stack. So this is just trying to keep things in the narrative at this point and trying to correct the narrative that suddenly fell off because it didn't fit the narrative. Now, of course, you think somebody who works at the beer company in Milwaukee is going to be some white guy with a suppressor and an assault weapon and body armor and all this other stuff that they put on all these narratives, like the Ohio shooter or the El Paso shooter or the Parkland shooter. Instead, it wound up being somebody who doesn't fit the narrative here and somebody who was actually being pushed around. Somebody was being bullied and he snapped. It didn't fit the narrative anymore, and suddenly it fell off the news, and we didn't hear a word about it anymore. I mean, nobody talked about this for more than a couple hours after this. As soon as the photo was released of the person who did the shooting, gone. And now, of course, they put the noose out there because, I mean, it happened 5 years ago. If the guy hadn't let it go after 5 years, if it even happened, and I don't even buy that it happened at this point, but it happened 5 years ago. If the guy hadn't let it go after 5 years, then there was something else seriously wrong with him, and he should have been assessed by somebody. Somebody should have known something and said something before that. If he was still talking about it and still being bothered after 5 years, no. I don't buy a word of this. I do not buy a sentence of the CNN article. This is just trying to forward a narrative. Let's see, what else? Our HR team notified him of the incident. It was investigated. He didn't even see it. The HR team had to tell him. Fuck this story. We're done with this one. I got an alarm clock going off because I didn't dismiss it before we went. No, I'm done with this story. There's nothing here. This is just an attempt to pander and put a narrative back in place. All right, one more story here. So this is kind of funny, and I kind of enjoy this here. AOC aligned progressive candidates fall flat in Super Tuesday contest. This is from James Levinson of Fox News. So remember, I don't even remember what bill it was. I think it was actually the impeachment. If people didn't vote the way that AOC wanted on the impeachment, I don't know if it was the impeachment or the idea to open up a investigation or what the hell it was, but anybody who didn't vote AOC's way on a bill, she always came out and said that she has got a line of progressives out there and Democrat socialists who are waiting to primary the Democrats who won't vote the way that AOC wants. And she's not even talking Republicans here. She's talking the Democrats she is threatening. And of course, she didn't pay her dues and instead took the dues money that she had to pay to the Democrat Party and went to go fund campaigns for Democratic Socialists to go out and primary establishment Union Democrats. That was made very well known that she wasn't going to do that, and that was what she was actually doing with the money. But according to Fox News, and this is according to James Levinson over there at Fox News, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's progressive candidates did not have a Super Tuesday in the first congressional primaries of the 2020 cycle. The Democrat establishment, on the other hand, could breathe a sigh of relief after three primary challengers from Texas and California underperformed in highly anticipated contests against longtime Democrat incumbents and establishment darlings. Excuse me. A favorite of progressives across the country, Texas congressional candidate Jessica Cisneros, an immigration lawyer, came just short of recreating the AOC primary upset of her own when she attempted to unseat 9-term incumbent Harry Cuellar, who represents Texas's 28th district of south of San Antonio. She played strong to her progressive roots and often referred to Cuellar as Trump's favorite Democrat, also receiving high-profile endorsements from Democratic presidential candidates, including Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. So, yeah. AOC tried to throw her weight around against people, and she tried to get rid of people who were establishment and didn't want to follow the progressive agenda, which is failing miserably at this point. And what we saw on Super Tuesday is absolutely proof of that. I don't care what you say. What we saw on Tuesday is absolutely proof of that. She's trying to uphold this narrative. She's trying to keep it up. And she's trying to say that she's still the star that's going to keep all of this going. And we actually have statistics to show that this isn't going to fly in play. Now, in Texas, I'm not surprised. In Texas, I am most surprised that Bernie Sanders did as well as he did for as long as he did at this point. And this is, again, just in a primary. And what we're also seeing here is just in a primary as well. But I'm sure that Harry Cuellar has gone back to his district. That was part of the problem with Joe Connolly. Was it Connolly or Donnelly? Connolly. Joe Connolly over in New York, was he not gone back to his... He treated his district just as badly as AOC did. But she came out and she made all these wild promises that she was going to be there and represent everybody all the time. And, now she's gone all the way all across the country stumping for Bernie Sanders as well. So yeah, he had been there. Joe Connolly had been there for 10 terms, I think, and was barely ever in his district, was barely ever listening to people, and yeah, she was able to primary him, but then she did the exact same thing. She did the exact same thing, and now wonders why she has no clout. But on top of that, here, like I said, actually, I'm surprised that the people underperformed in California. I really, really thought that that entire state was eager to go and, well, at least the Democrats in the state, not necessarily everybody in the state, but at least the Democrats in the state were eager to switch the whole state over into a progressive paradise and a playland for democratic socialism. And the fact that a lot of these progressives underperform just that fills my heart with hope. That really does. With that, I'm going to do a thing that I like and a thing that I hate, and I think we're going to get on out of here. So, one thing that I like today, of course, I'm very, very warned by the fact that yes, all these progressives fell flat over in California, because I do believe that the progressive tide is stemming. I don't necessarily, and I would love to have the libertarians on board with the GOP for one more election, but I don't think it's going to be nearly as necessary as it was last time. I love the libertarian movement, and I'm pleased to call myself friends with some card-carrying libertarians. But if they want to go off and start stumping for the third party instead of aligning with us to stem for socialism, I think the country's going to survive at this point. So this actually may be the resurgence that we need to get a third party in. A good economy and enough people joining the liberty movement to shake up and get a third party up into the debates. So if we have more than one party, the best ideas are going to float to the top and the worst ones are going to sink to the bottom. And we do still have the option to come together and band together if we need to stop a Bernie Sanders type from going and hitting the White House. So all around, at the end of this story, this is a good thing. This is going to cause great prosperity in this country, I think. I know that we're still going to fight over what the Donald does and what the Donald says and what the Donald's Twitter says, but I think we're going to be really okay after this. I think this boom was what we needed. I think this is going to bring people together. Yes, we're still going to fight over things. Yes, we're still going to disagree over things, but the country is in a lot better shape than I could have said in 2016. And that is including looking at all the Twitter fighting that I see going along here. Now for something that I hate. This is going right along the vein, too, of the election and what's going on there and what the fans of the progressive left have to say. So one of the things that I've been noticing time and time again is the failing of the United States education system, especially given the fact that they are mostly indoctrinating their students at this point to try and get them to fall into a socialist line. Which they've been doing that for years, but I mean, it's actually showing as we go into public discourse here. I mean, people actually believe that taxation is a necessary evil to run this country in the way that it was intended to be run. Now, in its bloated form, absolutely, yes. The country needs to be taxed almost to death in order to run the country in its bloated format. But if we went back to the basics, if we went back to the federal government mandating interstate commerce and nothing else, and letting everything else go down to the states' levels, taxation would still be theft, but the states could decide how the taxation went in a way that aligned with their populace, rather than having a one-size-fits-all federal government taxation system. If we went back down to that, we could easily afford to have the states pay in federal taxes and not have the federal government come directly to us. The problem is there's a generation of people, and sadly, under most metrics, I'm in that generation because in most metrics, the millennial line is in 1982, and I was born in 1984. Sometimes the millennial starts at 1985, depending on which publication you're reading, but for the most part, it's 1982. So this is my generation that's causing it. And they just want the government to grow. A lot of them didn't have parents at home. Well, they had parents at home, but their parents were so busy working and trying to some of these kids were raised by daycare. So, and either they were children of divorce or children of parents who were trying to keep this massive lifestyle up for them. Either way, they feel like they're entitled to everything, and everything gets handed to them, usually as a reward for the parent figure not being present in their lives. And now they're adults and they're expecting the world to do that for them as well. Maybe it's just because I had two parents at home and yes, both my parents worked, but they aligned their schedules in a way that we very rarely needed to have. To be completely honest, the very few times that we had to have a babysitter growing up, it was because my parents either needed a date night, which every married couple needs that, or my dad had a freelance side gig that sometimes he did on the weekends, and my mom worked nights. So, in 18, well, not 18 years, in like 13 years, there was maybe 100 times that we needed to be babysat, my sister and I. But most of my generation can't say that. Most of my generation got out of school, went to daycare, got home, had dinner, did homework, and went to bed. And I think that, and of course, was the shuttling between divorced parents as well, which was huge in the 90s. So one parent was trying to buy the affection of the other one, and the other parent was trying to buy the affection of the other one. And that wasn't every divorce situation, obviously, but there was a lot of them. And I do think a lot of that leads into this mentality that, yes, the government needs to grow, we need to take taxes away from everybody else, and the billionaires need to buy everything for the next generation. And sadly enough, that is going to be something that's going to, it was strong enough in this election, but it's something that's going to be even stronger in the next elections as well. 2024, 2028, and 2032 are going to be shit shows. Anyway, that's all that I have for this. I'm going to stop ranting at this point here. Go ahead and get this out to the audio platforms for the people who want to listen to this on their commute to work, on their commute home from work. We will be back here tomorrow with an additional hour of this, and we'll be doing... Oh, there's one more thing I want to announce here before we go. I'm going to open up a mailbag, and hopefully we'll be reading that on Thursdays instead. I'm actually going to make a new email address for this, but for the first week, we're going to use my regular business email for it. So if you have mailbag questions at all for this, go ahead, and I'll announce this tomorrow too and throughout the rest of the week. If you have mailbag questions, go ahead and email them to edsblogtwitter@gmail.com, edsblogtwitter@gmail.com, edsblogtwitter@gmail.com. Get your mailbag questions in, and we will answer them on Thursdays. Other than that, we will be back here tomorrow with an additional half an hour to an hour of conversation. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.